7th, 2024. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearing. We have 6 cases on the agenda, and there are 5 board members present for a quorum. The first case is RPC 17002020 on Fairfax Drive. Mr. Colucci, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Okay, yes, I want to introduce, although I can't see them, I think we have some representatives of the owners who are in a conference room, and because this is remote, I don't know who they are. So could you please introduce yourself?
I believe J.R. Schubel is on, Doug Koch is on, and Mark Patience is on.
Okay, yeah. So those are owners' representatives. I'm Tom Colucci. I think you all know me, and we filed the appeal on behalf of the owners. And I think our argument is quite simple. In the fall of, well, actually probably midsummer to fall of 2023, the current owners were negotiating the purchase of this building with the then owner of the building, which I believe is an affiliate of Teachers Annuity. And the transaction, in which I give ample evidence of both in the filing, and I think Rob has verified that this was indeed an arm's length sale. There was no mortgage that was being foreclosed. It was arm's length in every respect. And the sale price was $25 million. I think the other thing that Rob in his memo to the board indicated, which I don't think is correct, is that it was the sale of the leasehold only, but this was the sale of the entire interest in the property, both the fee and the leasehold estate. For some reason, the current owner, or not the current owner, the previous owner kept part of the property in a leasehold estate, and part of it was in a fee interest. And my client, RO, who had purchased the property, as I indicated, if you look at page 175 of your packet, or exhibit 4 to my filing, they did not just buy the leasehold interest, they bought the fee and the leasehold interest. So in essence, they own the entire property. And we think it's pretty clear, and I've cited a batch of case law in Virginia, that you can't ignore an arm's length sale of the subject property, because you have to remember, I don't see how the county can contend it was worth 49 million or even 44 million, when in fact, sophisticated parties under no compulsion to sell or under no compulsion to buy sold the property for $25 million. So it's just doesn't pass the minimal astonishment test that this property would have a value of $44 million. I think what Rob did in his valuation, he just went back to the standard valuation of capitalization of net operating income, which he did, and he just applied that mechanically. But as I understand the law, when you have an arm's length sale, and it's proximate to the date of valuation, you simply cannot ignore it. And I think that's what the county did here. In any event, I would request that the board enter its order reducing the value to $25 million, consistent with the arm's length price paid by the current owner in January of 2024. And again, I have the representatives of the owner, should you choose to ask any questions. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. This property was sold in January 5th of 2024 of this year, after the analysis period. We did look at the property with the owner. We had a tour. To my understanding, there was a tenant in the building, a GSA tenant, that is condemning their lease. I'm not sure what the updated or current status of that is. Um, by condemning the lease, I believe it was explained to me that the tenant is not renewing the lease or putting in a, uh, I guess, a amendment to their lease to terminate their lease, but they are paying on the lease. Now, I believe the owners can speak to this, but that's my understanding at the time of the inspection. So being that the sale was after the analysis period, we did take a look at this on an income approach. We did find that a few things that compared to last year, the same property was under review, and we found that the square footage changed drastically from last year to this year. The understanding is that the rent roll submitted actually equates a 31,083 square foot difference between last year's rent roll versus this year's rent roll. And we did see that I guess the owner is using a different quantifying method for the square footage. Last year, it was under a different representative for the owners, and they used a BOMA square footage versus this current owner's using an ANSI square footage. Despite that, the county did attempt to value this on income approach using the numbers that the new owner provided. And by doing so, there was a reduction. Not only that, we did find that the per square foot rates changed specifically and mainly due to, I believe, the main tenant there, the GSA tenant. I believe they occupy about 49,000 square feet within the building, and that's the majority tenant within the building. And that rate, if you take a look on page 6 of 351, now I tried to do a side-by-side comparison as best I could. I believe the rate changed previously from $48, $48.17 to I believe $39.89, and then on a different floor from $45 to $41. Not sure if that's a reflection of the difference in square footage and how that computes out, but those are the observations that I have given the new rent roll that was submitted to me. Just going back onto the summary page, we did see that the changes that were made in our revision. We did retest or make a revision to this property, and we reduced the assessment by another 11%, and that's on top of the 22% reduction from last year's assessment. So last year's assessment, we dropped about 14,232,900. And then we dropped it another 11%, as I mentioned. So overall, about another 33% drop from last year's assessment, given our reduction. And looking at the history, the property didn't change as much. I mean, this is the same property. One might argue it's stabilized, being that the vacant square footage has remained consistent throughout the prior years. And the only other thing that I'd like to add, I did make the comment that no 2023 INE was submitted, but at a later time, the owner did submit that to me. So again, I spoke to that and how it's changed with some of the points that I pointed out from last year to this year. I think that's all I have for now. We're open for questions. I believe actually, think the tenant in the building, yeah, the GSA lease, I'm sorry, is Homeland Security. We all know that Homeland Security does have a headquarters in St. Elizabeth in DC. Not sure the status of when or if they're moving over to that campus, but I believe that is, kind of speaks to maybe the future of this tenant. I do want to also point out that this property was part of a site plan, and the site plan, I believe, was for a residential conversion from office to residential. I did put it in my notes and spoke to that in the department's section of the BOE memo. We did also include, as Mr. Colucci pointed out, the notes that CoStar states. Now, this is whatever CoStar had mentioned about this sale, we kind of just copy and pasted just to keep it, verbatim as this show that CoStar is mentioning how this sale transacted, not the department. We're just simply reiterating what they said. Again, this property was part of Site Plan 85, which was originally approved by the board in 1971. As of November 2021, there's an amendment that permits an office building, 270,306 square feet of office GFA, and approximately 183,299 square feet of parking area. Now, a major site plan amendment and rezoning was sought during this time frame for a residential building, and I believe I attached some justification for that. But currently, this project is on hold per the county website. So that's all I have for now, but we're open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. All right, I'll start with a question for Mr. Peralta. Back to this site plan. So what would the value of the property be based on the site plan number 85?
Because it's on hold, we're not valuing as such. I can look that up and do the math if you'd like. If you have other questions, I could do the math and then get back to you.
Okay, no, well, because just from a standpoint of being consistent, I can't recall where we've had one that's been on hold before. I mean, if there's a site plan, we value it as a site plan. Do we have other properties in Arlington that the site plans are, on hold?
Not to my knowledge. This is somewhat unique, and I believe that if I can go back and see, I don't think we've ever evaluated this on a site plan. I think because it's on hold that we don't carry that status and value it as such.
Right, but it wasn't always on hold.
Yes, this is
Right.
true. But I think the existing building was still being operated as an office building. And so I think we kept the income approach on this property. And there was another property that we did the same for this year as well. Although there was a site plan, the office building was 100% being occupied. I believe it's 100%, but I believe it was being utilized as an office currently, and we actually opted to do an income approach to the value.
Okay, well, that's the first I've heard of this. The argument I always hear from the county is if there's a site plan, we value it as a site plan. So now we're here and this is on hold. And so we've opted, because it was being operated, to leave it as is. And we have people come in all the time that say, we got a site plan on this and we don't want to have it valued on the site plan. We want it to be valued as is. And the answer has always been, if there's a site plan on it, we value it on the site plan. So I'm confused there. It doesn't seem like we're very uniform or equalized with others. Mr. Yates,
Yeah, is it a regulatory action that put it on hold? I mean, is there something legally that's put it on hold, or is that just a word?
I think referring to the county's website, it's on hold. I think because the plan was to change the site plan and amend it to an apartment conversion. I think that's why it was on the hold status, but I'm not 100% certain that that's the case.
Right, well, my feeling is once it changes and gets approved, then it would be valued on the new site plan. But I have a problem that we've got a site plan on it, that it's not equalized with other site plans, properties with site plans, that are valued on the site plan. So I would like to know what the value of it is based on the site plan. Mr. Metzger.
First, I second that or support it, what you just said. It's what I've been thinking the entire presentation. Having said that, I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. I have two timeframes for the sale. One is January 2024 and one is late 2023. For the appellant, what do you have as the sales data record?
Well, the deed was recorded in early January. However, the contract was a 2023 contract, and there was an LOI showing that the parties were negotiating the sale of this asset in, I believe it was September, October of 2023. So you have to have a nexus to 2023, and the fact that the title company didn't record the deed because right around that time of the year, there's a lot of days at the end of the year that the clerk's office is closed for business, so you can't record a deed.
Okay, thanks. That's clear. Thanks a lot.
Okay, any other questions while we're waiting on Mr. Peralta?
I'm happy to wait for Mr. Peralta.
Just minor, to the appellant, you said
Mr.
that,
Yates, go ahead.
I'm sorry, the GSA is condemning the lease or whatever the term is determined. Do any idea when they're getting out or what the status beyond that is?
Yeah, I would defer that to the client contact who's on the call, if they know. Yeah, JR or Mark, are you able to
This is
respond to
Doug.
that? Yeah, Doug.
Yeah, I can speak to the, Tom, I can speak to the different questions that are currently raised. Currently the GSA is holding over. We don't know what their plans are. They're not very quick to respond and they're not very clear in their process. They have moved out of some of the space on certain floors. There's 3 floors where there's some people operating and they're paying rent under the leases that they haven't vacated from. We know that they have this campus being built at St. E's. That's what's created uncertainty, with the future of what can be done with the building. If they're vacating, you might be able to go back, and this will explain the rest, to the site plan process and consider what's possible. But there was never a completed site plan process. When they say hold, the project stopped. The previous owner, I guess about 18 months ago, kind of abandoned working on getting anything approved there. They ran into some obstacles and decided they would just sell the asset. The confusion here being to me is I know that the hardest effort in ever trying to value a building, the general appraisal process, and the job of an appraiser is to determine, at what price a third-party arm's length willing buyer and willing seller will transact at. In this case,
All
we
right.
know exactly what that number is.
Okay, you've
And
answered the
that's
question. Thank you,
demonstrative
sir.
of value.
Mr. Peralta, rather than put you under the pressure as we're sitting here waiting, it's probably going to take you a little bit to calculate that and have Derek agree with it. So if everybody's in agreement, we can pause this, move on to the second case, and then come back to you. That'll give you time to calculate that, because I think that number is pretty important.
Yeah, I think I do want to check into the actual site plan as well. It might have expired since it was approved in 1971, and by on hold, meaning it hasn't been pursued further. So I'll have to check on that as well.
If I could add some commentary on that, our office worked on that case, and I think I could help clarify it if anyone wanted to listen to me.
Sure.
If
Yeah.
you've got information, we'd
Okay.
like to hear it. Yes, sir.
So there is no site plan approved, and remember, a site plan is a legislative act. What happened with the current site plan that was on hold is the prior owner of the building was dealing with that site plan or trying to prosecute that site plan probably for about 2 years. All right. The site plan, as it was filed, met with substantial resistance from county staff. There was significant resistance. And what the site plan was seeking, so if you want to sharpen your pencil, I think what you'll find out is if you compute the site plan, the number will be under $25 million. It was seeking approval of 691 residential units, okay? However, in the Roslyn district, in order to avail yourself of the additional density, you have to pay to the county what's called community benefits commensurate with the difference between.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you 1 second, Mr. Colucci. You're talking about residential units. I'm talking about the original site plan for the office building.
Well, the original site plan is what I think Rob said. It's an office building.
That's what was.
Right, well,
in
that's
effect.
the only one that's approved.
Correct.
Yeah, so to talk about, what is being applied for, I don't think that's
Well, no, I
germane to this.
thought that was the question that you were posing, but the current site plan is clear. It's been there since 71.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. Derek, are you okay with that? That will,
Yeah, I am. I think there's a lot more research that goes in our evaluation on this property, which is, not being very clearly, I think, articulated when we say on hold. That does sound like a term, but I think Rob running the calculation for you guys will help.
okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and move this along. So we're gonna just take a little break on this so you can finish up and bring us those numbers, and then we'll move on to the second case. So Rob, you can go off camera so as you're doing your calculations.
All right.
The
Thank
same
you.
thing. If Mr. Colucci, if you turn your camera off, we'll come back to you. And so we'll get Ms. Roskin is up, and then do we have somebody, Grant Steinhauser's office?
Yep.
Who's the
Sorry, this is Emmanuel La Madrid. I'm representing for the owner today.
and what is your last name, sir?
La Madrid, LA and Madrid.
Okay, and so I assume, do we have the authorization?
Yep.
Okay, I'd like the county to. say
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay. It's hard when you got somebody else's name on the agenda. Okay. All right, the RPC is 120411044 at 5910 Wilson Boulevard. Mr. La Madrid, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Sounds good. Thank you. So the subject property is an assisted living facility comprised of 3 sections, totaling 175 units and 184 beds. The subject is currently assessed on cost, as are most of the healthcare, if not all of the healthcare facilities in Arlington. We do appreciate that the county provided a I&E questionnaire this year that, better captures, it was a healthcare I&E, so it better captures exactly what's going on in a property of this type. So we, on page 2, did include our side-by-side comparisons for some of the trailing year actuals for the subject property. We see here a pretty significant increase in expenses, which we'll get into a little bit later. We felt that this was important to discuss today because as the county was able to provide a I&E questionnaire that better captures the healthcare property type, we felt that it was important to discuss exactly what's going on at the property from an income standpoint. We have provided a cost approach in the later pages, which I'll discuss in a moment. In short, income at the property increased 11% year over year. However, this increase was small compared to the increase in expenses. Expenses increased at the property by 23% year over year. And that leads us to an NOI of 1.98 million, which demonstrates an indicated value of 23,186,819 before any deductions for FF&E and any deductions attributed to personal property, intangible property. And on page 3, we begin our the sections for the building are broken up as part of our cost approach. We try to match the assessor's approach exactly and keep things as as consistent as possible with theirs. We did use a 1/1/2024 data valuation. I believe the assessor has 10/24. But our main difference here comes in the building quality. If I'm not mistaken, the assessor uses a good building quality, and we use a average building quality. The building is about 33 years old, with most renovations being mostly just to keep it up to up to standard. No major renovations. And what we did here was basically just add the 3 cost approach for the depreciated improvement value, and then add the county's fair land value of 8,073,000, and that's how we arrive at our indicated cost approach value of 26,326,100. We've included some articles as well in our packet on page 8 of our submission, along with cap rate support on page 7. And here we just kind of want to breeze over what we've seen in the senior housing market that was also seen as in particular with this property, which is a significant increase to expenses due to high inflation and then just general labor costs. While the industry did see an increase in income as occupancy rates have continued to improve from coronavirus, there was a pretty significant increase as well in the expenses, as I said on page 9, where expenses at senior housing facilities have seen an increase nearly 2 or 3 times more than the average, given higher inflation and shortage of labor. But I believe that is all from our end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Roskin for the county, please.
Thank you, board members. Thank you, Emmanuel. Yes, we complete the cost approach for all the healthcare facilities in the county. And I did review the appellant's submitted documents. I looked at their income because I wanted to determine if there were how much updating or maintenance that was being completed on the property. And after reviewing it and through email discussion, determined that they've spent a reasonable amount maintaining this property. They've spent about over $280,000 plus this year alone to maintain the property. And as for the cost estimates, yes, I did do a side-by-side comparison of the appellant's cost estimate and ours, and it is the quality. There's also our depreciation that we're using is higher than the depreciation that they're using. So we're using more depreciation, basically. The shape is another big factor in the cost of these properties. And that's why I included an aerial photo. So if you go to page 44 of the packet, you'll see an aerial photo. Okay. I'll give you a moment. So in the Marshall and Swift cost, there are two ways that you can cost. Well, not two ways. There are a multiple things that go into this cost estimate, and one of them is the shape or perimeter. And as you can see through the aerial photo, the perimeter is not practical. It's basically based on a linear footage, okay, not square footage, but linear. And or you can use shape. And for Marshall and Swift, I actually used a lesser shape. I could have used 4, which is very irregular, but instead I used 3. The shape that the appellant used is 2, which is rectangular. The shape for 3 is irregular and 4 is very irregular. So as you can see, by looking at the aerial photo, I chose something in between, okay, which is 3. And that does affect the cost because you're talking about the cost for a foundation, walls, the roof line are more complex in this property versus a rectangular shaped building. And so those were the biggest factors or differences, if you will, in our two cost estimates, theirs versus ours. And so I'm going to still confirm that our cost estimate is accurate. Thank you. I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Metzgen.
Thank you. For the department, I heard the appellant say that they submitted an I&E per the department's request. But the department, you started off your comments with, well, we evaluate these kinds of properties on a cost basis. Why did you get into the I&E at all in this regard?
So in the past couple of years, we have we redeveloped or revamped our income and expense statement for healthcare, hoping that we could collect enough data to value on the income approach. We still have not found sufficient data, accurate data, and enough property owners to submit I&Es so we can do a proper analysis on the income approach for healthcare facilities. We still feel at this time that the cost approach is the best method or the approach, if you will, for the healthcare facilities. We only have like 8 of them in the county.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Mr. Mendez.
Sure. It seems that a large part of this argument is the condition of the property itself. I think I heard the appellant mention good versus average. The property is, I think, 35 years old now. Have there been any significant updates that would make it good versus average condition?
So let's see, I inspected it. I last did an interior inspection in July of 2022. And in the comments, let's see, based on a recent interior permits, new updates since original construction, 33 years old, remodeled kitchens, serveries in all buildings, new transfer pump, boiler system, and typical replacement of floor coverings and interior walls, new roof on the Shenandoah building, along with other typical maintenance. There were some signs of water stains in the ceiling of the Shenandoah building. However, it has a newer roof. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Metzgen.
Thanks. It's been established over time with standard commercial buildings. We have heard many times that county staff, DREA staff, takes classes to determine the capital improvements that are needed or appropriate to change an effective age of a building and by how many years. Heard that over and over again. I buy it. Makes sense. I understand it. Is this looking at this kind of unusual, non-standard, certainly not office building, and in many ways, not even in a multifamily building, part of that formal education that staff gets from time to time?
Yes, it's the same method used for all property classes.
And instead of changing the effective year for this kind of property, you just rate it whether it's average good or very good or excellent or something like single family homes. Is that right?
It's a combination of rating. Well, so average good, I mean, that could be a wide range, the term average good. So basically what you do is you compare, there's only 8 properties. So I compare those 8 properties. How does this fit within those 8 properties? Okay.
Good.
That's if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, and per the formal training that you've received over time.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Mr. Yates? Turn your microphone on, please.
Sorry. Laura, you mentioned the shape of this property is a big factor in that value. You said your number is much different than what the appellant came up with the shape they used. What is the value with the shape they used? I'm just wondering what that difference is. Did you run that?
You know, I could not isolate. There's too many variables, and I'd have to. One of the things that I noted on their cost estimate, I think it was the last one, the Shenandoah building. They used, well, before they were using shape. They used shape for the 2 buildings. I think it was James and Shenandoah, but it was the last one, which is, what is the name? Potomac? For the Potomac, there we go. Okay, for the Potomac, all right, I lost it. I highlighted it, but okay, yes. For the Potomac, they used a perimeter instead of shape. And you have to, when you're using Marshall and Swift, you have to use one or the other. You can't use both. And when they calculated the perimeter, it was like 144 linear feet. So I went back and checked, and my linear footage came out to 580.
Wow, big difference. And that's where you're saying that substantial impact came in.
And you know what? I take that back. Scratch that. I read it wrong. That is for the training building. Excuse me. That's because on the Potomac cost estimate, not only is it the Potomac building, but it also includes the training building, which is a house nearby or next door, if you will. So my apologies. I take that back. I misspoke.
Okay, never mind.
Okay, nothing further? Okay,
No.
Ms. Ruskin, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Sure. So once again, I used shape. I came in at something that was in between what you actually see evidenced in the aerial photo versus what Marshall and Swift suggest that you use. They suggest potentially a 4. The appellant is using a 2. I used a 3. That's in between. My depreciation is higher. I'm applying more depreciation on the cost estimates than what the appellant is applying. And once again, that's based on an interior exterior inspection back in July 2022, researching permits, also reviewing the current 2023 INE in response, asking how much maintenance has been done. And yes, they're still maintaining this property. Like I said, they spent about $285,000 plus in maintaining the property for the year 2023 alone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. La Madrid, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yep, thank you. Again, thank you, Lori, for your explanation. We did try to try our best to match the county's approach, which is that discrepancy in the shape, but we feel that this property may warrant a lower quality type, which would be the average that we used. Again, that value brings us a lot closer to kind of capture a little bit of what's going on from an income standpoint at the property. And we feel that a lot of the inputs that have gone in, especially at 285,000, has not been any major renovations, but instead just things to keep the property up to date with the market and functioning properly for its residents. But that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. All right, is this among the board members? Where's everybody on this? Mr. Matzkin?
I thought the key here was, I appreciated the I&E versus cost approach and what they're doing, and that made a lot of sense to me, and it clarified a lot of things for me. The key is the condition of the building, and the department's explanation was, well, it's relative to other similar buildings. I mean, the use of this building is just so vastly different in so many ways, as I had already said, from other multifamily, that they can only compare among themselves. And regardless of shape and whether the boilers are 2 years old or 22 years old, if they can compare this small subset of 8 buildings and come out with which one's better, which one's not so good, then I'm feeling comfortable that the final conclusion of the department is the correct one.
Okay, Mr. Mendez?
Yeah, I'd like to add, I believe there was a sale for almost 31 million in 2021. So that's just kind of in the back of my head. I think to Ken's point, this is mostly an argument about the shape of the property. And I would be okay with the county's number.
Okay, Mr. Yates?
Yeah, I'm also okay with the county's number. That I just don't feel the appellant proved that the county is incorrect in their approach and how they came about it.
Okay, Mr. Penaranda?
Yeah, I agree. I think Ms. Roskin did a very good job, doing her due diligence to make sure that the measurements and the shapes and all that make a difference are there, not just by going through numbers, but by verifying and making an inspection. And even using the income approach, since there's no cap rate that we have on the guidelines, I kind of went in average cap rates between apartments and residences. Even with the $1.9 some million that they had as an NOI on their income and expenses statement, I come up with an almost close number to what the assessment is. So I'm okay with the current assessment the way it was presented.
All right, I don't know. I think, the inspection was nearly 2 years ago. It's very subjective. I kind of halfway in between the two of them. I think hers is probably a little too high. His is a little too low. But it sounds like everybody's okay with it. So we'll take a motion then.
I'll make a motion to confirm the county as revised number.
Okay. Okay, there's a motion and there's a second by Mr. Matzkin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The county's confirmed at 28,581,300.
Those numbers.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Mr. Peralta, do we have a number yet, or should we move on?
Yes, we're here.
You have a number?
Yes.
Okay, all right, then we will go back to, we have Mr. Colucci on.
Yeah, I rejoined here.
There we go. Okay, all right, so back to RPC 17002020, Fairfax Drive. So the question was for Mr. Peralta, what is the value based on the original site plan? What do you have for us?
The value would be about 17.9 million, which is less than the land currently. And with respect to 100% market value, this is why we opted to go on income approach. The more clarification on the site plan, it is grouped with other properties that either have superseded the there are new site plans on the sites. In addition to that, it's also grouped with expired site plans. We do see that there was a amendment site plan accepted by the county, but not voted on or approved. It was filed January 31 of 2024 for the residential portion. We did look into that as well, valuing it based on, I believe, 691 units. That value would be 59,426,000. So 59,426,000. I believe the current value on the property is between, both what the purchase price of 25 million and what that value of the amendment would have been once approved.
Right, but it's not approved yet. So, okay.
Right.
All right, other questions? No? Okay, then any final comments, Mr. Peralta, on this case?
No, just that the property was sold after the valuation date. With the, I guess, the county's acceptance of the new amendment, I think, time will tell, if this gets approved or not. But, I believe the valuation on an income approach, we have tenants in place, and, the valuation of the site plan wouldn't be enough to support the land for this property. So when seeking 100% market value, the county stands by the current assessment. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Colucci, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Okay, first of all, if you use an income approach, okay, you have to use a cap rate. Office buildings are trading between a 15 and a 20% cap rate all over Washington metro area, Arlington included, for older office buildings. These aren't trophy assets. These are old, dilapidated office buildings. So to use an 8% cap rate on an income approach is really kind of insane, really. Also, the sale is the sale is the sale. Rob said it, the sale is too late. We gave ample evidence that this sale was negotiated in 2023. We've got a letter of intent. We've got a signed contract. And just because the deed was recorded a couple days later in January doesn't mean the department can stick its head in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist. The fact of the matter is, that's what somebody paid for this asset.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Colucci and Mr. Peralta. Okay, it's just among the board. Mr. Mendez.
Sure. I personally thought the site plan was going to come up somewhere in between the two, but with the site plan being lower, I think we're supposed to look at 100% of fair market value. The property sold. I know it was on January 4th, it appears, but like we've discussed before, when we reopen the case, we try to take a look at all the facts. So, I would be in favor of the sale price personally.
Right. This is a tough one. I mean, I look at this and think, you know, the policy is that we value it on the site plan. And, you know, the fact that it's worth less as the site plan than what it's generating, I mean, it's kind of like you can't have your cake and eat it too. I mean, we don't flip it when appellants come in and argue that all the time, like, oh, under the current use, it's valued less, you know, we go with the site plan. I agree with Mr. Mendez. I mean, since it's lower than the proposed land value, and the appellant's asking for the 25 million of the actual sales price, I mean, I tend to lean towards that. I mean, myself. Where's Mr. Yates?
That's where I've been looking too, because you know, if it was somewhere between the two, I'd feel a little bit better. But
Right.
But the income approach, I understand the issues with GSA. It is not going to achieve that number again, ever. And that's a given. GSA is leaving, no one else is going in. And then it comes back to, it was done in 23. It just didn't record yet.
Right, but I would say also that with the new site plan, you know, that I
Oh,
assume
yeah.
should be voted on anytime soon, that this will probably only be for 1 year, and next year it would go on the value of the site plan, but.
Right.
Okay, Mr. Matskin, you had your hand up too?
I did. I want to just stay on the straight and narrow. We do not consider sales and nothing sold until the deed's recorded after 1/1. Now, the county lots of times says it's really after 10/1 of the prior year. With so few sales, I think October, November sales are good. January sales, we just don't want to know that. We also don't want to know what GSA is doing. They haven't done it as of 1/1. We don't know that they're not going to get backfilled. We don't know what the rent might be or might not be. All of that's for next year at this time. I feel very uncomfortable having such a low site plan, the mathematics that Rob worked out for us, but that's what we got. I mean, who are we to say other than what the numbers are, given that's the only, I'm repeating, Mary, what you said several times, we go with site plans when they're approved. This whole stuff is mysterious and artificial. And I don't like that such a low number, but that's the only thing that's relevant. Nothing else is in the mix. Comments, questions, challenges.
Okay, Mr. Penaranda?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to be the only one that is outside everything going down. But, you know, I agree with the county. I think, you know, we've seen so many cases that even late sales, we have not considered them because we always say, well, it's going to be considered next year because it's a sale that would be under the dates for the next assessment, and not having anything else or any plan that is really in place as far as the site plan that is, you know, current, not amended or nothing that has been updated. I don't see that the county did anything incorrect by doing with the income approach, considering the tenants are there, you know, and they're still paying on the property. So I was okay with the revised assessment.
Okay, I guess my question is just though, how does that play out with the standpoint of just being consistent and equalized with other properties that have site plans on it, that we all day long say it's got a site plan on it, we don't care what it's generating, the value of it is based on the site plan?
If I may,
Mr. Peralta, no,
Okay.
Mr. Peralta, it's just among the board.
Sure.
You know, that's my concern with it, that, you know, it's because, oh, the site plan's only worth this, then we're going to go put a different type of methodology on this property, which makes it out of equalization with all the other properties.
Because we
That
don't
do
like
have
the
site
site plan number. Yeah, we'll get a
Right,
different
that's what
number.
I'm
We don't
saying. I
like
mean,
what
it
we do
doesn't seem like,
normally.
you know, oh, we
Sadly,
don't like the
that's-
number, it's too low, so, you know, we're going to do something else. Mr. Mendez.
Yeah, in this case, well, I don't think we've seen a case before where it's on hold. At least I haven't since I've been here. So I think that kind of changes things a little bit. But yeah, I mean, fair market value is fair market value. I'm surprised that appellate didn't come in here arguing that they would want the site plan number.
Right, like I said, I mean, I'm, you know, in trying to split the difference or, whatnot. I mean, I look at it and I thought if the appellant wants the 25 million, I would go to the 25 million. If that's not going to pass, then I think it should be on the value of the site plan, which is even lower. So I would assume a few people won't like that even more. So Mr. Gates, go ahead.
I'm at the 25 million. I understand the date and the difference of crossing January 1st and the holiday and the weekend till it got filed. But I can't, the site plan is still, I take it in place. Where this hold is in place is there's a new proposed one that has not been voted on. That next year, if it gets passed, it's going to jump quite a bit. I think the 25 million was the purchase price and it happened and probably got transferred but not recorded in 23.
All right. So Mr. Mendez, are you okay with that?
I would go with the purchase price, 25 million.
All right. Mr. Matzkin?
What would the rationale be that we're going with the purchase price that happened outside the assessment period? That's question.
Yeah, to me, it's just like when we make, an adjustment on the cap rate when it's, I don't know, 80% vacant. Sometimes it's just warrants such because the income approach is what, almost double the sales price. I mean, just with that, and I know it was just a couple days into 2024. It's so egregious. I feel like there's something there.
So it's an exception. It's just egregious, maybe is a good word. Okay, thank you.
All right, then I'm going to move to accept the appellant's number of the 25 million, even based on the sales price. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Mendez, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
All right.
4-1 without Jose. Okay, the assessment is reduced to 25 million even based on the sales price, with the caveat that if that new site plan gets approved, it's going to go back up again based on the site plan. So don't come back in here next year and say, oh, but we have a sales price of 25 million that was recorded in 2024. It will be based on the site plan.
All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate your
All right.
time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you both. All right, Ms. Roskin, if you want to come back on, and Mr. Harmon. Okay, next case is RPC 180160006 at 2690 Clarendon Boulevard. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about the property.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board. Lori, good morning. So this is the Clarendon Starbucks. It's right across the street from the Whole Foods. The issue on appeal is the second floor space at this property. The main floor, ground floor, is Starbucks. It does have a second floor above it. You access it around the back. There's a side stairwell that you go through a gate and get up to that second floor space. Now, as to further round out the picture as background, you'll note that the initial assessment imputed income on 4,100 square feet versus 3,100 square feet that's included on the revised assessment. This is because that difference of about 1,000 square feet, that's due to the second floor space. It's not an exact duplicate of the first floor space. There is the mechanical room included on the second floor. We inspected this property in June. The county did observe that and made that correction on the revision. So I appreciate Lori taking a look at that. Now, the remainder of the second floor space outside of the mechanical room it's a very eclectic space. The prior tenant was on a month-to-month lease, and in December of 2023, that tenant gave notice that they would vacate at the end of January. So as of the first of the year, the tenant was known to be vacating at the end of January. And as I stated, Lori and I did inspect this property in June. We were able to see the vacant space. We were able to see firsthand the difficulties the owner will have with leasing the space back up. To start, as I said, the entrance is around the back of the building. You have to go up this metal staircase through a gate at the bottom. There's no elevators, so it's not ADA compliant. And the space, I wish we had included pictures of it, but it's very uniquely situated. Prior uses, it's not really, it's assessed as retail. It's had retail tenants, but it's not going to be your traditional retail, especially not for this neighborhood. Prior uses have been, it was used as an apartment at one point. It's been a hair salon. It was a behavioral therapy space. And most recently, the tenant was he was an independent cell phone repair shop, kind of a one-man outfit that he ran out of this second floor. So aside from the space having poor access, there isn't much signage space and there's no parking. So it'll take a very unique tenant to occupy this space. Finding a tenant for the second floor space will be difficult. The cost required to re-tenant and reconfigure the space. When we inspected it, it is a very odd layout. There will need to be walls demised and reconfigured to get a market tenant in there. Those costs need to be accounted for with the DFL, which we have provided on column G of the county's test page. Next, the county imputes rent for this space at $47.50 per square foot. This is based on, it appears to be a mistake. The county's rent roll that they've included on page 7 of the board pack shows that the prior tenant, according to the county, was paying $47.50 per square foot, but that's not accurate. Page 32, two different places in the appeal, you can see the actual rental rate was only $38.18. On page 32 of the appeal, you can see where I replied to an email from Lori stating that the rental rate for that second floor space was only $38.18. This is the same rate, $38.18, that was reported on 2 occasions. It was reported when the 2023 INE was filed with the county. It was included on that rent roll, and then it was included with the 2023 INE rent roll that was included as part of the appeal as well. Now, that rent roll that was submitted with the appeal did not get transferred over correctly to the board pack. So unfortunately, the rent roll that's included in the board pack is not the one that was submitted with the appeal. So you won't be able to see the $38.18, but if it were copied over correctly, it would show $38.18 per square foot, not the $47.50 that the county's imputed to this space. Now, that prior tenant's $38 rate was also for a month-to-month lease. He only did month-to-month for 3 months until he vacated at the beginning of the year. Now, given the conditions of the space and the limited tenant pool, we imputed $30 per square foot for the second floor space as reflective of market rent for a space of this type. So those are the issues with the second floor space. What would it rent for, and how do we account for the cost required to lease this space up? I want to point out that the county's revised value does come in close to the actual 2023 NOI, but it's important to remember that looking forward for 2024, the property won't have a tenant in the second floor space paying rent. This was known in 2023. In 2023, that second floor tenant paid about $51,000 in rent. Projecting forward, we need to remove this from the 2023 NOI and see that the assessment's NOI is well above what the property can hope to achieve in 2024. It's also important to note that while the county imputes income as if the space is leased at above market rates, it imputes expenses that are actually lower than what the property incurred in 2023. So essentially, the county's test assumes the second floor space is fully leased at above market rents, but expenses are going to decrease in 2024. As such, we respectfully request the assessment be reduced as set forth in the appellant stabilized potential in column G on the county's test page. And finally, just a brief note, this property did sell 2 years prior to the date of value. Keep in mind, at the time of sale, this property was fully leased, and interest rates, this is before any interest rate increases by the Fed. Interest rates have increased about over 4% since the time of sale. So you would need to make those adjustments in order to compare the 2021 sale price to a 2024 valuation date. You'd need to adjust the NOI to account for the property second floor tenant leaving and being vacant. As well, you need to make adjustments to the cap rate. So a property like this with Starbucks as the primary tenant, oftentimes investors just go in with a straight cap rate valuation. They'll just select a cap rate and apply it to the actual NOI, come up with the value. So if we look at it from that standpoint, we can get the 2021 NOI that the seller used based on the reported cap rate. We take that NOI, we grow the cap rate by just 4% to account for interest rates, make the adjustment, you get to a value that's very close to what we've proposed on the stabilized potential. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Roskin for the county, please.
Thank you, board. Okay, so basically, to go back and say, well, yes, I did an interior inspection this year on this particular property, and at that time, the second floor was vacant. Yes, I recognize that the access is via stairs on the side of the property. Also noted that there are 5 parking spaces. One of them is a handicap, but those are parking spaces that are dedicated to this specific property. I want to make a note that this is really close next door to Market Commons. So there are a variety of other options for parking. There's street parking. You can also pay for parking underneath the retail at the Market Commons. And this is standard, not standard, that's the wrong word. This is common. So all of the retail in this area experience the same thing. This is not an unusual situation, okay? There is parking around. Now, back to reviewing, when we review the summary page. So basically what I did for column F, when I that's not a reconstruction, when I revised column F, all I simply did was the other that was being reported. I was basically the sublet rent for wireless. Okay, so all I did was just add that at the top, you know, to make it more consistent, because it's not other, it's actually rent. So as you follow down the column, you'll see that we applied the standard 7% vacancy rate for this property. And now we're taking a look at the expenses. My expenses are a little less than what they're being reported because they're reporting some expenses that are not typical annual operational expenses, like tax consultant, or the replacement of water heaters. Okay, and that's why you see a difference of about 4,000 for expenses from column E, what's being reported, versus column F, what's being revised. Now, when you go and take a look at the rent, if you go look at the rent roll, which is on page 5, it wasn't obvious on the 2023 INE. I actually asked the questions in the email, which is included in this packet. I asked them, okay, first of all, was behavior therapy. They were actually occupying the space or paying the rent up through September 30th of 2023. And so what I did was, on their INE, they weren't showing their rent. They showed it as 0 when in fact they were paying it. So what I did is, you'll see the 2020 rent roll, the 2021 and 2022. I looked at behavioral therapy. What were they paying for rent? There was a 3% increase every year. So that's what I did for 2023. I said, okay, 3% increase from year 2022. They only occupied it for 9 months. So I divided that by 12, multiplied it by 9 for 9 months. That's how I came up with behavioral therapy rent. As you can see, it's stated on the summary page in the comments. Okay. Then I added to that the wireless, the sublet, their rent that they're paying. And that's how I came up with, as you can see, the number, the rent in red on the rent roll page under 2023. That's how I came up with that number. So then when you go back to the summary page, that is the number that I applied under the revision. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Metzger.
I need some help on rows 1 and 2. I'll start with the department. In column D, what I find is office, I assume, row 1, office, I assume, is that's 3,100 square foot space we're talking about, which has been retail and it's been office, it's been all kinds of stuff. You haven't, and the contention, as the appellant started out with, is that space. Appellant and you now agree what the size of it is. So now we're talking about where, what kind of income it might generate. It was generating some as of 1/1/24, and that was temporary. But again, we're supposed to be on 1/1/24 and not future events and who might show up and who might rent it and who might not. So I want to get through all of that and just say, consider it like we have oftentimes a Rule 1A, a vacant office, or if you want to call it vacant retail, but vacant. So I don't see any of that in columns D, E, or F, and I'll get to the appellant. I do see it in G, which, Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, those are numbers, column G, that were supplied to you from the appellant. Is that right? Before I can go on?
Yes, that's the appellant's number.
Yeah, great. Okay. So your, as an example, revised worksheet F, that you have nothing in the row 1, you have row 2. Is that both floors, what you assume the rent is going to be for both floors? Okay, great. And what
Yes.
is the I guess it's the 4,100 or so square feet that Starbucks occupies. How many dollars is that going to generate as of 1/1/24, as far as you know?
Starbucks does not occupy 4,100 first. And what is Starbucks going to pay for rent in January 2024? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, for the year, as of 1/1/24, what is your estimate? What is the income landlord going to get for income from Starbucks?
For Starbucks. If you go without, I don't want to say any numbers. If you go to the rent roll and you take a look at the top line there for Starbucks, underneath where it says rent, apply 3%.
3% more. Okay, hold on. I'm getting there. Because, and the residual of this number here on row 2, retail, is what is expected or anticipated from the second floor, right?
It's combined, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to page 5, your rent roll. Great. Okay. Retail, 7%. CPI. Here's the rent in dollars. Okay, great. So in your column F, well, again, that's just all of retail. I don't see what's from, again, I'm on page 5 with the highlighted. That's all retail. I don't know what, I'm trying to find out what you value the second story space. And I just figured if I can get the value of the first floor, I would know the difference between the total and the first floor and get the second floor. But on this general revised worksheet, it's all just the same numbers I have on the I&E on page, whatever it is, 4, I guess.
And Mr.
I
Metzgen,
still don't know what you're valuing the second floor for.
If you look at the rent roll, take a look at the rent roll. I'm sorry, page 5.
Yep.
The number in red.
Total value, yeah.
On the rent roll, or the rent roll analysis, which is page 5, the rent that's in red, that is the second floor. Do you see the red number?
Okay. No, I'm sorry. I was on the wrong page. That's great. Wonderful.
Does that
That's
answer
exactly
your
what I
question?
wanted to know. Okay. Let me just write that down so I don't lose it.
Okay, any other
At
questions?
3,100 square feet. Thank you.
No? Okay, Ms. Ruskin, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so once again, I took a look at what the property was being rented for in 2023. And there is showing a 3% increase year over year for rent. Also, we applied the standard, the stabilized vacancy rate of 7%, which at the time the subject was not experiencing for last year. And looking at the expenses, you can see there's about a $4,000 difference for expenses. I did ask the questions, and we do not consider tax consultants or replacement of
Water heater.
equipment, replacement of equipment as your typical operational expenses. And that's why my revised expense number is a little lower than what they reported. But if you look at the history, it's in line with historically what's being reported. And my NOI is right around 8,000 less.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. So the county's relying on a tenant prior to the last tenant for that second floor space to get their rental rate. The most recent tenant in that space was the wireless RXX on a month-to-month lease. That's what appears on the rent roll. That's why Arlington Behavioral Therapy does not appear on the rent roll, because they weren't in there. They actually left in 2021, sublet to this cell phone repair company since then. At the end of that lease, the cell phone company or cell phone repair guy leased on a month-to-month directly from the owner at $38 a foot. That $47.50 is well outdated. That goes back to a prior tenant, and it predates the pandemic. So the $38, the most recent rental rate at this property. After seeing the property, it's in really rough shape. It's not comparable to Market Commons properties. It's been an apartment, a hair salon. It's really, I don't know. We put it in as office, but I don't know what you would use it as. It's a unique space, to say the least. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. All right, it's just among the board. Where's everybody on this? Mr. Penaranda?
Yeah, I'm okay with the revised assessment. I think the corrections were made based on the square footage, and I'm okay with the rates that the county used, averaging, and it was testified that the previous tenant on the second floor was still paying rent until October of last year. So even if they sublet the space, I don't see that just because they left that we should discount all that income for 2024.
Okay, Mr. Mendez?
I agree with Mr. Penaranda. I don't think it's going to take all year to lease up the space upstairs. It's a very prominent location. I mean, it's been there forever. So I'd be okay with the county's revised number.
I tend to agree. Mr. Yates or Mr.
I
Matsky?
agree.
I'm fumbling with numbers, but it's not possible to me that they could get $47 a square foot. It's just not possible. It's a prominent location, but you can't get there from here. You got to go around the back, and God knows what you got to do. I'm surprised that the temporary tenant paid $38, but I would go with that. And I've just been running through numbers, and I got a bunch of mishmash here. And I've got 17 different bottom lines, and none of them satisfy me. But it's probably something very close to, and you can pin me down to the dollar if you want, $10,000 a year. The NOI should be $10,000 less than it is shown in column F. And just for the heck of it, I'll just tell you what that is right now, which makes it $2,301,400. And again, I can't imagine they're going to get $38. It's a terrible retail, and I don't know why anybody would. Now it's a lot of money for office. I don't know why anybody would want to set up an office over a pure retail spot. It smells good, but is too busy. Too many cars coming out. Too many people coming in and out. But if the last tenant paid 38, I'm willing to go with it. That's it.
Okay, I think you're in the minority with that, but okay. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Sure. I'll go ahead and move that we reduce the assessment to $2,447,300 based on the revised assessment.
I'll second.
Okay, motion is second by Mr. Mendez. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's 4-1 without Mr. Matskin. The assessments reduced to the county's revised number of 2,447,300. Thank you. All right, if Mr. Peralta will come back on. Okay, the next case on the agenda is RPC 14044-260 at 875 North Randolph. That case has been, the appellant's asked to withdraw that case. Is there any objection? I assume no from the county?
No.
Okay, so I will move to accept the withdrawal. Do I have a second? Mr. Mendez, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. That case is withdrawn. Okay. All right, I just got a text that we need to take a break. So what we're going to do, it's 10:21. We'll take a 5-minute break. Everybody come back about 26 after. And we will finish up these last 2 cases. Thank you. Okay, we just need Mr. Yates. There he is. All right, we've got everybody back. Okay, moving along to the fifth case on the agenda, RPC 150600004 at 2425 Wilson Boulevard. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Yes, thank you. 2425 Wilson. This is a 73,000 square foot office and courthouse. It was built in 1968. The issues on appeal are the NLA, the potential rental income, the vacancy rate, and the cap rate. For the NLA, the county imputes an additional 5,000 square feet as what is labeled unaccounted square feet. This is row 2B of the county's revision in column F. Now, I'm not really sure where the county came up with this 5,000 square feet of unaccounted square feet. It appears based on the assessor's notes that this space is based on what the I&E reports as total building area instead of total net leasable area. Now, as we're all aware, the total building area is typically greater than total net leasable area due to what's called core factor. This is space that is not income producing. It includes elevator lobbies and mechanical rooms and various unusable space, unleasable space such as that. In appraisal practice, no income is attributed to core factor space as the revision in column F does with this unaccounted square footage. So we can see how the county made this error. The assessor's note indicates the 2023 I&E reported this total building area, which is true. If you look at page 34 of the appeal, you'll see the total building area lists a figure that's higher than the net leasable area. However, the 2023 I&E also shows the net leasable area as well. So I'm not really sure why the revision chose to use the total building area instead of the net leasable area. But you can see from the assessor's note that the prior year's I&Es reported similar NLA to what was reported for 2023. Additionally, the rent roll was submitted on 2 occasions to the county. It also reflects that lower square footage value, the net leasable area versus the total building area. Unfortunately, the owner's rent roll on this property as well was submitted correctly with the appeal, but did not get copied over correctly in the board pack. So it does not show up in the board pack correctly, but if it did, it would also reflect that lower NLA figure right up just over 72,000 square feet. So 72,000 square feet matches the page the assessor references. It matches the rent roll submitted with the I&E. It matches prior year's I&Es. I'm not really sure why on the revision the county chose to impute income on 5,000 square feet. That appears to be core factor. The revision labels it as unaccounted square feet. The county did not reach out to us to ask about any of this. We are always available, happy to help resolve discrepancy the county may have in order to facilitate an accurate assessment outside of a board hearing. But again, in this case, the county did not contact us about this one, and this is our first opportunity to address it. This issue also impacts the vacancy rate as well. The county's test, you can see, lowers the vacancy rate from the initial assessment, which used 13%, to only 8% on the revision. This is based on incorrect NLA being used based on that 5,000 square feet of what they call unaccounted square feet. The actual vacancy rate at the property on January 1st was 13.7%. Per the county guidelines, a vacancy rate above 13% requires a vacancy rate on the assessment be imputed at 13%. So by adding the phantom 5,000 square feet to the NLA as unaccounted square feet, the county has not only imputed potential rental income that doesn't exist at the property, but also imputed the incorrect vacancy rate as a result. Next, for the potential rental income, the question is, what is the appropriate rate to impute for the leased office space, the owner-occupied space, and the vacant space? The leased space is at an average rate of $38.24 per square foot before concessions. Now, there's 3 tenants at this property who aren't the owner. 2 of those 3 renewed their leases last year. These renewals were at base rental rates of $37 and $39, but required 9% and 17% concessions, respectively, which all in all brings the net effective rental rate of these 2 new leases down to $33.39 per square foot. These 2 new renewals also account for 24% of the total property in LA. So a significant portion of the property was released last year at $33.39 per square foot. Now, given that these are recent renewals and they are for a significant portion of the building, they are highly indicative of the market for this property. Therefore, we've imputed the net effective rental rate of these two lease extensions of $33.39 per square foot for both the remaining vacant space at the property and the owner occupied space. Now, the assessment makes no account for concessions required by these new leases, which treats this property differently than similar properties and is not in accordance with generally accepted appraisal practice. We did provide details of these new leases with the appeal to the county. You can also see they were summarized in our written arguments as well. Now, the county states in their response that they're relying on the 2020 I&E for their rental rate. Of course, we know what's happened in the market since 2020. Rental rates have decreased significantly. Concessions have increased significantly. This is exactly what we've seen happen at this property. Those two new lease renewals in 2023, those were at a rate that's 34% lower than their prior rental rates. This is what we've seen across the county since the pandemic took hold. Rental rates have decreased. So the county's, relying on 2020 rental rates. We're relying on 2023 actual leases at the property. We see that if we apply the lower rate to the 2020 rate that the county cites, if we apply that 34% discount, we get to a rate that's even below ours. So we provided these lease details there in the appeal on pages 30 to 32. The county knows what the current market is for this property based on those renewals from last year. Now, again, those were at 33.39. That's the rate that's appropriate to impute for the owner occupied and the remainder of the vacant space. Next, for the cap rate, the past couple of hearings, the county has not contested that their cap rates are below market. I've spoken extensively about the errors and how the county arrived at their cap rate and how all available evidence supports higher cap rates. We heard from another appellant this morning that older office buildings such as this one are trading at cap rates of 15 to 20%. I've spoken about how uniformity is not a safe harbor for assessments in excess of fair market value under Virginia law. And again, going back to the first case we heard today, the county applied their methodology to that property, 1616 Fort Myer Drive. The county's methodology could only get to a value of $44 million, which is nearly $20 million higher than the actual sale price of that property. So that property illustrates that the county's guidelines simply cannot capture the actual market. The error is primarily with cap rates. Now, we also heard on that property, and I'm sure we'll hear it on these properties, that the assessment is down from prior year's assessments, but a decrease does not imply fair market value has been achieved. As we saw on that first property, even with the decreasing assessments, the county assessment was still nearly double the actual fair market value of that property. I'll just finish with the Supreme Court of Virginia has on numerous occasions stated that this is the proper venue for correcting assessed values. The court has stated that boards are the correct venue. Otherwise, courts will become de facto boards of equalization. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Thank you. I'll try to address the majority of what the appellant is stating as issues for this case. But for the primary, factor, I want to focus in on the square footage. Over the years, this property has changed in square footage. But consistently, I've seen 77,550. You'll actually see in the prior year's case, the appellant believed that the total square footage in column G was 77,730 square feet. So that's kind of why I like to keep these in place and kind of show the history of this property as appealed by the same firm over the years, because it kind of draws conclusions and kind of points out different things. So when looking at this this most current I&E on page 3451, I'd like to point out that the square footage for the owner-occupied space changed. You'll see in page 3451 that the square footage, the area that is occupied by the owner space, grew from 36,867 square feet in 2022 to 42,790 square feet in 2023. And unfortunately, it's sort of cut off in the rent roll as it's shown there. But if you pay attention to the actual I&E that was filled out, there's a line item on page 34 that states what is the square footage for the different areas, and you'll see that, you know, office leasable area is 63,189, and then they go to owner occupied area at 42,796. The appellant is showing the owner occupied space at 36,000 36,867, and that's a difference of 5,929 square feet. So the county did, you know, make that correction on our end to show that, you know, there's a difference there where the appellant, I believe, is keeping that square footage as vacant square footage area versus accounting for, you know, the total square foot for the owner occupied space. So we did make those corrections on the revision. When looking at the actual space, we did see that the leased office space was at $39.06 per square foot. We do see that on the remaining space, I've included a CoStar report that shows their asking rent is $39.75 for all the other spaces that are vacant in the building. So we do see that you know, at $36, we believe that's a fair assessment of, you know, what the space could be leased for. I made the comparison of the two renewals that the appellant points out. The two renewals, you know, is my understanding that, you know, the leases in place would get a better per square foot rate, or the owners would offer a better per square foot rate to the leases in place, because they don't have to offer, you know, too much in TIs. They're already in the space, they're working in the space, versus someone that's off the street. You have to throw everything at them to, you know, entice them to come into the building, whereas these people are already in place. And so the rate reflects that. So I don't believe it's indicative of, you know, what a new tenant would be offered or contracted for the vacant space that's available in this building. And to speak to the vacant space that's available, you know, again, I listed the CoStar report showing what's available as of today. I know that there hasn't been any leases signed until, actually, I do see there's a lease signed for 2,111 square feet, and that was signed in April of this year at $39.75 by David Garner and Associates. So to me, that kind of speaks to what the current market is for this property as to what it can achieve as far as rental income. And then when looking at, I guess, the expenses, you know, with that vacant square footage as shown per the rent roll, what happens is the rent rolls that are presented don't often, well, I should say, in this case, it wasn't presented where all the allocated square feet for the vacant space, suite numbers included, was provided. It wasn't provided like we see in other cases where, you know, this is the vacant suite, this is the amount of square footage. It was just a total number. This is what is vacant. But going through what I do with every case is if there's a discrepancy in the current rent roll, I try to look at previous rent rolls to kind of decipher, you know, where the issues may lie, and kind of come across what a reasonable square footage, and, you know, try to align what the vacant square footage is and what suites those are associated with. In this case, that wasn't provided. And so then that's where I came up with the 8%, as shown on the rent roll, as 3,234 square feet vacant. Again, the discrepancy between the appellant's pro forma and departments is I believe that there was an extra, counting of owner occupied space as vacant versus it should have been owner occupied space as shown on page 34 of 51. With respect to cap rate, we've talked about our cap rates. Nowhere have we stated that our cap rates are below market. What we're showing is that, based on the resources that were provided, we're above the range. Our rates are higher than the rates that were suggested that, we follow or that we apply to the office properties. We do see that, again, based on the column G and G1, the appellant feels that this property should increase in value based on the numbers that they provided from 2023 to, what the 2023 review versus what the 2024 review is. The county is offering a reduction from the current assessment. That's in addition to the 5% decrease that we already decreased this property to compared to last year's assessment. We believe that column G1 or column F represents a truer market value based on the newer information that was provided. I believe we dropped the value $137,700, and then the appellant is increasing their value by almost $600,000 when you compare G to G1. So with that, we do ask the board confirm the reduction that was provided, given the new information that we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Matzkin.
First, for the appellant, the department has described how they deduced based on apparently not, suite by suite, tenant by tenant numbers, what he believes the vacancy is, but you gave a, 8%, you've gave a 13.8%. Where did you get that, deduction from? I'm sorry,
that's from the rent roll that was submitted with the INE. So Mr. Peralta chose to use the second page of the INE to get the NLA versus the actual rent roll. And just to elaborate, we did inspect this property last year and we saw that the owner was moving suites around. So, that would explain why there's changes year over year. But yes, we got it from the rent roll that was submitted by the owner with the INE.
Okay, anybody else? Mr. Penaranda. Turn your microphone on, sir.
Sorry about
Sorry, I
that.
didn't know
This is for Mr. Harmon. I think the difference in the net leasable area of the 77,550 and the one that is reported of 72,617 is mainly in the conference center and also what's described in the worksheet as the executive boardroom. That is really the 35 feet and then 1405, which partially I think it's being paid by AT&T. Don't you think that should be included in the net leasable area?
We did include that, Mr. Panaranda. Let me see how it got copied over to the board pack. So we do have, if you look at row 4, we have so let me see. So on our appeal, this didn't get copied over on the county's test the way it was submitted. But if you look at the county's test, row 2B, the county's labeled it as unaccounted square feet. On the appeal, that was listed as the conference center. Right. And then we have the executive boardrooms listed as 1,405. That got transferred over on the county's test as row 4 conference center. So our appeal is in the packet, and you can see that it did correctly identify those, and it just didn't get copied over correctly. So page 29 of the appeal, you can see that we have the conference center in the executive boardrooms. Looks like they were just named something different when the county transferred them.
Okay, so I guess to Mr. Peralta, then, are the numbers that are shown on the worksheet incorrect then, or?
No, I would agree to that. I would agree that the conference center and the executive conference center are accounted for the space that they total 4933, but they don't account for the owner occupied space. Again, I noted 5,929 square feet should be added to their owner occupied space.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Matskin?
I counted 3 different total building sizes between 72,600 and 79,900 or so. I'm hoping that there might be a recorded deed or building specs somewhere when this building was built that would give the right number so we don't have this discussion in the future. So it's not a question, it's a suggestion.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Mendez?
Yeah, for the county, in the revision, I noticed that the vacancy went down from 13 to 8. Is that just based on new lease that was signed, or why was that changed?
That was based on the rent roll that we saw. Again, there was, when comparing the previous rent rolls to the newest rent roll, we found that that square footage that the appellant believes is vacant is part of the owner occupied space that they didn't allocate towards the owner occupied space, but allocated towards the vacant square footage. And I showed on CoStar what was shown as far as the current square feet that's vacant. Again, the rent roll doesn't show the suite and vacant square footage that's allocated with each suite that is vacant.
Mr. Matskin?
Thank you. I forgot to ask this before. I'm glad you brought it up, Rob. The CoStar vacancy, that's a when? This month?
That's why I said it's current, and we don't have any leases that were signed previous or it's not being brought
Yeah,
up.
so
Yeah.
you're going on the rent rolls that the appellant supplied. This CoStar stuff's not, it's interesting maybe, but not relevant. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Peralta, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, again, when reviewing this property, we did make a revision based on the new information. We do deduce that the property is not 13% vacant. It is actually 8% vacant. We do see that the new valuation did show a reduction of almost 700,000. And we do show that based on the information we asked, that the county, the board confirmed the reduction, 17,244,600. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hartman, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. So, typically we look at properties and leases in place and recent leases as being most indicative of what future leases will bring. Well, this property had 2 new leases extended last year. Why won't we use those? Mr. Peralta wants to use the CoStar May of 2024 leases that haven't been verified. No request was made about those. We don't know what the concessions required for that lease was. We know that the 2023 leases required up to 17% concessions. The 2023 lease renewals were for 24% of the NLA. They came in at $33.39 a square foot. Why wouldn't we use that? Why are we relying on 2024 information that hasn't been verified? We don't know what the concessions are. Will likely come in near those. Finally, the county has stated the cap rates are higher than some sources, but you'll notice no sources were mentioned. That's because there are no sources that the county's cap rates are higher than. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. All right, it's just among the board. Where is everybody on this? Go ahead, Mr. Matskin.
Everyone seems reluctant. I agree with the appellant's very first comments that a reduction isn't necessarily from last year isn't necessarily fair market value. The numbers are the numbers, and we hear often from the department, well, it's down 10% or 30%, so that's probably okay. They say it more professionally than that. And I don't, that to me, that's not compelling. The CoStar stuff, as the appellant said, from this year, which I asked the department about, is also not relevant. On the other hand, the department took good rental numbers and then for vacant space and unaccounted for space, reduced it by 10%. That's the way they do it in order to maintain equalization. And do it in all cases. And I think that's the proper way to do it. Because sometimes concessions are less, some are more, and we're equalizing and we're not assessing for a loan, as an example. The appellant's argument of that maybe that 4,933 square feet is core factor lost. That's not, no core factor in any building is that low ever. I understood and accepted the placement of that number as explained by the department. And therefore I've covered my point. So therefore I support the revised assessment by the department.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Veneranda?
I agree with Mr. Maxkin. I think the revised assessment is, in my opinion, was properly done.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, there's Mr. Yates or Mr.
I'm good.
Mendez. Anything different?
Nothing different.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion then? Mr. Matzkin.
I move that we accept the department's revised assessment of $17,244,600.
Okay, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. It is unanimous. The county's revised number of 17,244,600 has been confirmed. Okay, and that brings us to the last case on the agenda. It is RPC 36001020, excuse me, at 1919 South 8th Street. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes on this property.
Yes, thank you. So 1919 South Eads, this is an 89,000 square foot office in Crystal City. It was built in 1989. As of the date of value, the property was over 28% vacant, which is an increase of about 8% from 1 year prior due to 2 tenants vacating in 2023. The issues on appeal are the potential rental income, the operating expenses, and the cap rate. To start, it appears that the county may have used the 2022 INE instead of the 2023 INE when reviewing this property. Now, I say this because the rent roll the county has produced on page 5 of the appeal does not match what was submitted with the 2023 INE, which was also submitted with the appeal. So the 2023 INE was submitted to the county on 2 occasions. The rent roll that the county has reproduced on page 5 does not match the rent roll that was included with that INE. The 2023 INE rent roll is on page 44 of the appeal. And if you take a look at that page, you'll notice that it does not match what the county has produced on page 5. The county's rent roll on page 5 that they created includes 2 tenants who are not at this building. The county's rent roll on page 5 shows communities and schools and the Russell Group as both as tenants at the property. But if you look at the end dates on those leases, they were both in 2023. Both those tenants did vacate last year. Neither of them appears on the year-end 2023 INE rent roll. Combined, the county's rent roll appears to include these tenants as occupying 6,800 square feet of space that they do not actually occupy at the building. Now, the county mentions in their write-up that they have unaccounted vacant square feet. This is the main reason why they ended up with unaccounted square feet. They've included tenants in the building that are not actually there. This is row 2A on the county's revision in column F, with $377,000 of income imputed on this phantom space that is a result of the county not using the 2023 INE rent roll. Now, here again, we were not asked about this discrepancy or this confusion or whatever it may be, we're available. We want to sort these out, with the county. We don't want to have to come in front of the board and have to address these issues that could have been resolved. We were not asked any of these questions. We were not aware that the county had these issues until we got the board case. Next, for the owner occupied space, the assessment increased the rental rate on this space from the 2023 assessment to the 2024 assessment. Last year, this property, the owner occupied space, was assessed at $30 per square foot. For 2024, it's gone up to $32 per square foot. Now, if we look at the data for Arlington County rents over the course of 2023, what we did was we pulled Q4 2022 to Q4 2023 to capture that year-over-year change. Office rents in the county actually decreased by 2.4%. So there's really no justification for rents at this property to have increased by 6.5% instead of actually decreasing. We've included that data in the appeal. It's page 37 of the board pack. Additionally, the county states in their write-up that rental rates advertised on CoStar are as low as $31 per square foot before any concessions. So why would they impute a higher rent than what is being advertised on CoStar? The advertised rate, less the county's 10% uniform concessions, comes out to only $28 per square foot. Yet the assessment again is at $32 per square foot. The assessment also increased the rent imputed on the lease space from the initial assessment to the revision. This is because the revised assessment reduces the amount of concessions applied to the in-place leases. Now, the county was aware on the initial assessment of the current rents. Those were reported on the 2022 I&E rent roll, showed the current rent, showed the escalation rates. That's page 49 of the appeal. So the county did have that information when they created the initial assessment. Then upon review, came back and removed some of those concessions that were included on the initial assessment. Next, the assessment imputes operating expenses at the 2023 rate with no growth to account for anticipated inflation. Our stabilized potential in column G2 uses the 2023 actual operating expenses grown by 3% to account for anticipated growth in cost. Finally, the cap rate used by the assessment, as we've discussed many times, is based on what appears to be a misreading of the Corpex report and is not reflective of the market. It applies 2 of the 3 adjustments that Corpex states must be made to have his cap rates be valid. The county only makes 2 of those 3 adjustments. Additionally, the one sale that they use is the Microsoft sale from February of 2022, before any interest rate increases took hold in the market. This property also has above market vacancy. I mean, it's an extremely, it's a 1989 build, above market vacancy. We've seen sales for these types of properties in Ballston. We've seen 2 of them come in at right at $100 a foot. I mean, these, and the main discrepancy here is the cap rate between those sales and this property. Our value puts this property at the sale comps. It's at $97 a foot on our stabilized potential by using the county's assessed value of 2023, the rental rate at $30 a foot for the owner occupied space, by growing operating expenses to account for anticipated inflation, and by using a cap rate that's closer to what the market actually was as of the first of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Mr. Peralta for the county, please.
Yes. If the board can turn to page 44, as Mr. Harmon pointed out, the rent roll. I'd like to focus in on that, on this case as well as other cases. Mr. Harmon makes the point that, they'd like to be forthcoming and clear about any questions that, may be asked by the county. I currently have 2 cases on hold. I finished them and asked for the rent rolls. One case had no rents attached to the rent rolls. The other case had some questions regarding certain leases that were signed. Currently, for page 44 of this case, you'll see that the leases in place are listed. But again, as I've asked and as the county asked when filling out the I&Es, we asked for specifics on what the vacant square footage is. For me, I'd love to see what, suites are those associated with. And therefore, I took the information that was given me in 2023 and sort of merged that with the information I received in 2022. So you'll see on page 5 of the packet that, I kind of merged the two, and I did note that, the rents are not included in the 2023 rent roll. In previous years, they did include the rents on these month-to-month spaces for consumer electronics, and that was the owner-occupied space, I believe. And then in addition to that, I took what suites were vacating. It shows on page 5 that the Russell Group vacates or terminates in 2023 in space 103, and then in suite 107, same time frame is when they terminate. So then I added all those suites just to account for and make sure I have it correctly noted as far as the vacant space is concerned. Added it all up, I came up with a number of 6,779. When looking at the rent roll and looking at CoStar, I mean, I did opt to go with the higher number that I found at 21,979, and that was after going back and forth through the owner occupied space and then the vacant square footages and the suites. In lieu of not having that information provided in the 2023 rent roll, as it shows on page 44, I went with the number that reconciled on my end that I saw, given that in CoStar they're showing 21,979 square feet vacant. And I'd like to make a comment. Mr. Maskin said we don't really consider CoStar, and we think it's garbage. That's not the case. We rely on CoStar for the majority of the time because the owners are the ones that actually list this information on CoStar. So we deem that to be reliable. And at the end of the year, we do take a good look at CoStar. We compare what the leasable vacant space or what has leased on the property and kind of cross-check that again with the 2023 INE to see what spaces are available, what leases are expiring. I say we, but I say it's mainly I that look at these, so I can speak with 100% certainty that this is the case on every property that we review for the county. And so when looking at this, 21,979 square feet is vacant as of currently. There's no leases that have been signed, nothing brought forward, by the appellant to say, these leases, there's more leases that were signed, or there's, this amount of square foot that is vacant. I'm only finding, again, 6,779 square feet vacant based on cross-checking previous rent rolls. Whether it's the same situation as the last case where there's a counting of vacant square feet where there shouldn't be. I'd like to see what suites and what the square footage is, but based on what I found in CoStar, 21,000 or so square feet vacant, that's how I applied the revision for this case. In the market sub area, we see that, even the leases in place are averaging 35 per square foot. We know that based on CoStar as well, that the range, that the asking rent range is $31 to $38 a square feet. We're at the low end at $32. I think it's a fair assessment of this, this space. Even in 2020, the appellant provided information to suggest that that's what they're getting on a month-to-month basis. If you look at the 2021 rent roll, they impute a $32 per square foot rate, and we didn't increase that from previous years. So that's why we apply that $32 per square foot rate for the retest, as well as what we originally had in the original assessment, I believe. Actually, no, we increased that to suggest that the $32 was flat over all the spaces minus what the leases in place are showing, which we imputed a $34 per square foot rate. So given that, we retested at that figure that is consistent with what the reconstruction shows. We increased our expenses by 75 cents to reflect what is currently being shown as expenses at $13. And we come up with a lower reduced valuation based on the revision. So we do ask that the board take that in consideration and confirm the revision of 11,941,900. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Maskin.
This regards vacant office space. First, my comment was, Rob, that you mentioned was misinterpreted. I didn't say that you don't pay attention to CoStar. I said that I don't pay attention to CoStar because it's current stuff and we're stuck at New Year's Eve 2024. Okay, so continuing on vacant space. You state on page 2 that almost 25,500 square feet is vacant. So, okay, CoStar says a different number, but that's probably more modern. I'm just going with 24.349 for a moment. And I look at the I&E and I get two numbers that are vacant. I assume what you call unaccounted for vacant office is one of them, and that's 61,000 plus. And then on row 2, vacant office is certainly one of them, and that's 6,700 or so square feet. I add them up and it's about 18,400, but you say it's 25,000. Now that's okay. The only difference is that you value vacant office space at $32 and occupied space at $34. So that's why I want to know whether, so far it seems to me you're giving the appellant a break, but maybe there should be more vacant space at 34. Was I clear? So maybe you can just go from I&E to page 2 and tell me what what it ought to be on the I&E for total vacant square footage valued at $32 square foot.
What I said was that the I&E for 2023, column E, they have a total square footage of 25,349. It doesn't match the rent roll for 2023 because the 2023 rent roll doesn't show the vacant square footage with the suite numbers. And so when I cross-checked and I found the lease that was previous, I think it was 2022 or 2021, I found what leases expired in the building as of 2022 or 2023, took those as vacant square footage. And I was only able to, come up with 6,500 square feet or so vacant. And then I went on CoStar and said, okay, let me give it the benefit of the doubt and see what is vacant. What are they listing as vacant square footage? So I went with the 21,979 square feet as vacant. And, in retrospect, if you look at the two numbers, 25,349 or 21,979, we would still have that 28% vacant applied to either one. The difference comes to the below the line figure, but I don't think that's, even the appellant is not arguing that for any below the line excess vacancy deduction. We're both at 28%. So I think we could safely remove that from the calculate or from the
Mr.
table.
Metzgen, there's a very simple explanation here. Page 41 of the appeal is the I&E from 2023. There's a line on it that says space vacant and available for lease January 1. That line says 25,349 square feet. That's what the owner reported as vacant. There's no need to go to CoStar in August to see what vacancy is. That's what it was. You take that number and you can kind of do a temperature checker and to see if that's accurate. So you take that 25,349, and then you go to the rent roll, which does not request vacant space, by the way, but you add up the leases in place and you add those to that 25,000 square feet of vacant space, and you get what the owners reported as the total building area. So those two numbers add up. The total occupied space, 63,795. You add the 25,349 to that, you get the 89,144 total leasable area. So,
Yeah, the total I got was very consistent everywhere I looked. It was what should be valued at 34 versus $32. That it would appear based on this page 44 that you just pointed out that about 7,000, I could do the math, but about 7,000 square feet ought to be valued at $2 less, $32 a square foot.
Yeah, and
Otherwise,
that's
go ahead.
yeah, and that's the main difference there. We're either looking at this unaccounted square feet, as vacant, or should it be part of something else? Should it be part of the owner occupied space
Right.
that we saw, like in last case, that was changed from year to year? So again, I don't disagree that the rent roll says, or the INE says 25,349. What I'm saying is that the rent roll doesn't match up to reflect the vacant square footage and suite numbers that I've seen in other cases.
it wasn't requested. The county doesn't request that information, so the owner didn't provide it.
Okay,
And now the county's upset.
okay. Enough of the bickering. Okay, are there other questions from board members? Mr. Peralta, take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, thank you. We've always requested square
Okay,
footage information. No, I'm speaking towards that. So it's a matter of looking at this case and what was provided in the past. You'll see that even last year, column G1, it was only 18,570 square feet vacant. And we know that those leases in place were supposed to expire in 2022, 2023. And that would be a reflection of, the anticipated vacancy that we see. The appellant always states is, this tenant is leaving, we're going to add that to our vacant square footage. So again, I stand by the revision of the revised square footage vacant. It shows in CoStar, there's no new leases that were signed in CoStar or anywhere that's presented. And so the 21,979 square feet vacant should be applied in the revision, and it confirms a reduction that the county is putting forth. Thank you.
okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, thank you. So you can see the INE rent roll that was submitted twice to the county. That's the county's form. The owner filled out the county's form. Nowhere does it ask for suite numbers of vacant of vacant space. It just asks for tenants. So, the county does from time to time follow up and request that information, and we provide it. We've been providing responses in a timely manner all season. We have a couple of requests from Rob last week that we're working on responses for. So it's not unusual for them to ask for it and for us to provide it. It wasn't requested on this one. The county stated they relied on CoStar for rents. Why don't we also look at CoStar for cap rates then? CoStar's cap rate for this submarket is 9.3%. Why only use some data from CoStar but not others? 9.3% is also what we arrived at for this property using different methodology. So we have all these data points pointing to a 9.3% cap on this 1989 building that's over 28% vacant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. All right, it's just among the board. Go ahead, Mr. Panoranda.
Yeah, it's true that they provide the forms that the county requests, but I think they should provide them filled out completely, to have to rely on rents from previous years because they just didn't, I guess, bother to fill out the current rents for 2023. To me, it's really not, a reliable form to go with. Just putting numbers that are convenient, just the square footage, to me, it's not enough. So I'm okay with the revised assessment based on the numbers that Mr. Peralta had to go with.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Yates?
I, yeah, I am probably, or I'm looking at the county's numbers and I understand where they came from with it. I hear the argument, but I was trying to do the math earlier too. There's gaps. I have to go with the county's numbers. I just don't see completeness in coming up with the numbers on the appellant side.
Okay, Mr. Mendez?
I would agree with the revision. I think it's hard to sympathize with the appellant when certain numbers aren't reported and everything's not exactly
Yeah, I'm
clear.
trying.
Okay,
What'd you say, Mark?
I was trying to see where the appellant is. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just couldn't put it all back together.
all right.
I'll just add that I again stayed on my one note that maybe there's more space that ought to be accounted for at less potential rent. But and it does come down a little, of course, but it's marginal. I think it's in the weeds, and I think my idea is good, but the substance of it's not relevant.
Okay, well, I think then we're in agreement. Does somebody like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll go ahead and move that we reduce the assessment to the revised numbers of 11,941,900.
Okay, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. The county's revised number of 11,941,900 has been confirmed. That completes the agenda. Does anybody have any other business? No? Okay, then we will stand adjourned at 11:19. Reconvene tomorrow morning in person for the board meeting, board members, August 28th at 9 a.m. See you.
Thank you all.
Then. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. And Mr. Panarenda, can I ask what you felt was missing from the INE? Just